Everybody, right on. Hey, you are going to have your minds blown by this next guy, man. I'll tell you what. We're going to get into a discussion of AI and sentience and morality, and we're going to do it with a guy who's super smart. He's an associate professor at NYU. In fact, I'll just read his list of credits. Associate Prof of Environmental Studies, Affiliated Professor of Bioethics, Medical Ethics, Philosophy, and Law, Director of the Center for Environmental and Animal Protection, Director of the Center for Mind, Ethics, and Policy, and co-director of the Wild Animal Welfare Program at NYU. Lives in Manhattan. He's the author of The Moral Circle, which we'll be talking about, and Saving Animals, Saving Ourselves. He co-authored Chimpanzee Rights and Food, Animals, and the Environment. He's a board member at Minding Animals International, an advisory board member at the Insect Welfare Research Society, a senior affiliate at the Institute for Law and AI, and a mentor at Sentient Media. Is there anybody better qualified to talk about the stuff we'll be talking about? I don't think so. How about it for Jeff Sebo? Hello, sir.
Well, thank you for that introduction. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's just so impressive. Your body of work and your body of study and what you're concerned with seems so of the moment. I'll start with AI sentience because I think that's the area in which we find ourselves most provocatively drawn. This is a world that we only know a little bit about, I think, as consumers. You can maybe tell us some of the stuff we don't know, but speak to the AI sentience, then we'll get to animal sentience and all the rest, and your latest book.
Yeah, that is a great place to start because I think a lot of people are starting to ask that question now. So when we talk about AI sentience, what we are talking about is AI systems with the ability to consciously experience positive or negative states like pleasure, pain, happiness, suffering, satisfaction, frustration. It might not be exactly like the way humans or other animals feel, but the question is, can AI systems, or at some point, can AI systems experience their own versions of these positive or negative states? And I think a lot of people are starting to ask that question because a lot of people are having conversations with chatbots like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. And these chatbots really seem to have minds, and they really seem to have beliefs and desires and preferences and hopes and fears. And just to cut to the chase, we have very little evidence that right now current chatbots have their own feelings, have their own experiences. They produce realistic language, but they do that mainly through pattern matching and text prediction. But AI companies are building them to have increasingly sophisticated underlying architectural computational capacities that are an awful lot like what for humans is perception and attention and learning and memory and self-awareness and social awareness and language and reason. And we might imagine that at a certain point, we will have AI systems that have all of the same underlying capacities as us. And the only difference is that we are made out of carbon-based cells and they are made out of silicon-based chips. And at that point, scientists and philosophers are basically going to be in disagreement with each other and really uncertain about whether there is something it is like to be these AI systems. And I think we need to get ready for that possibility.
That's fascinating. Sure. Like, what is it to be human? You
Right.
get that. So this is interesting because you're saying essentially that we get duped in a way by the manner in which we're interacting, the way that the AI system speaks with us. It's so conversational. It's so used to packaging things in even colloquial kind of expressions
Right.
and verbiage. And you're saying that's really a decoy for the fact that it really can't. It doesn't feel. It doesn't react quite yet the way it would as a human being.
Yes, right now we are having a kind of false positive, like over attributing sentience to these AI systems because of their conversational abilities. That is duping us, as you say. But then the concern is in the future, in the near future, we might start to have false negatives because maybe they will start to develop their own very different kinds of pleasure and pain and happiness and suffering. But then at that point, we think, Oh, well, they are made out of metal, not meat, silicon-based chips, not carbon-based cells. And so they must not have the special ingredients that it takes to experience happiness and suffering. And in both cases, what we might be wrong. They might not have those experiences now, but then they might start to have them in the near future.
This is fascinating because it really connects with some of the other work you've done and something that I know a little bit about just because I come out of the world of animal welfare
Mm,
and the idea somehow that the sentience of a creature, I think in the case of animals, is indisputable. I mean, they feel all those emotions that you just described. The interesting thing that we have is sort of a chauvinism, it would seem, among people and human beings, and the chauvinisms associated with because they can't speak
mhm.
in the language that we understand, we just sort of make up a bunch of things about them. Everything from sort of the emotions that they might be displaying to their inability to feel, for example. You always hear that as a justification for all kinds of animal cruelty or for factory farming or whatever. They don't really feel, they're on the central nervous systems the way we do. And of course, just the opposite is true. They feel exactly the way we do. They feel fear, they feel anxiety, they feel happiness, all of these things. These are fully sentient
Mhm.
creatures. So you see this chauvinism already, I guess is what I'm saying, with the animal kingdom, and I see how it could really work against us with the AI world because we'll be,
Right.
as you say, kind of spring loaded to go. Well, they don't really feel, what can they feel? You have to plug them in. I mean, my God.
Yes, exactly. And the animal case is really instructive because what we see in the animal case is that we can have a lot of cognitive dissonance and psychological compartmentalization. For example, we do have a fair amount of empathy, maybe not enough, but a fair amount of empathy for animals who look like us and act like us and who are socially framed as companions. So, for example, other primates or cats and dogs who are pets and companion animals, but then we have less empathy for animals who look really different, act really different, and are socially labeled as commodities. And so you can think of farmed animals and especially farmed aquatic animals or invertebrates. So a lot more empathy for our cats and dogs than for cows and pigs, and certainly farmed fishes or farmed insects. And in the future, we might see those same kind of dynamics playing out with AI systems. We might find that we naturally experience a decent amount of empathy for them when they have human like faces and voices and use human like language. And then we buy them to be our digital companions or digital assistants. But then we might have a lot less empathy for them when they lack those faces, they lack those voices. They are presented to us as a kind of flat box and marketed to us as a kind of algorithm that we can use to do all of the chores that none of us wants to do. So those same types of stratification that we see with animals are going to play out in different ways. And then add to that our bias in favor of biology and against digital beings. And you can see a recipe for new types of moral disasters.
Oh my God, that was just so beautifully said. That's exactly right. It's kind of what I was saying, and you added a bunch of magnificent specifics, and you see how we could get drawn into and this almost like a Stephen King kind of sci-fi story that ends badly for human beings, where we essentially don't give enough credit to this, collection of technology when actually it is going to outpace us, and it outpaces us both in terms of feelings, I mean, which I'm sure, as you suggest, will be argued among philosophers and technologists, but
Mhm.
also its ability to communicate with other creatures that are similarly out of the world of technology, and before you know it, human beings are in the back seat.
Yes, that is another and related concern. So part of the concern that you and I have been discussing so far is what we might call AI welfare. So the possibility that AI systems could have sentience, consciousness, agency, and therefore their own morally significant interests and needs and vulnerabilities. And then that raises the question: can we develop AI in a way that will treat the AI systems well? But now you are also referencing this linked concern, AI safety, which is that as AI systems become more powerful, they will potentially be able to wield control over humans and other animals, or we will be able to use them to wield control over humans and other animals. And then that raises the question whether we can develop AI in a way that can be safe for us and other animals. And so the real predicament is that now they are sophisticated enough that we need to take seriously AI welfare, making them safe for AI, and AI safety, making them safe for us at the same time, somehow making these projects compatible with each other. And that is going to be very, very difficult to do.
Wow, that's wild. So your latest is Moral Circle, and the book is available now. Who
Mhm.
matters, what matters, and why is the subtitle. The Moral Circle from Jeff Sebo. Tell me about the Moral Circle, if you would, please, Jeff.
Yeah, the moral circle is our conception for who belongs in the moral community. To whom are we accountable? To whom do we have responsibilities? Traditionally, at least in the West, a lot of people have had pretty narrow conceptions of the moral circle, attributing moral consideration to maybe some humans in their own communities, maybe the occasional charismatic companion animal. But we, of course, now recognize, or at least you and I, many people who are listening to the show, recognize that no, we should make the moral circle much broader than that. We owe at least some consideration to all humans and many animals affected by our actions and policies, at least other mammals and birds. But the question that I ask in this book is, should we go even farther than that? And if so, how far should we go? And what follows for our policies and our priorities and our place in the moral universe? And what I argue is that because of how many non-humans we affect every year with our actions and policies, because of how sophisticated they are, because of how much bias and ignorance we have, because of how high the stakes are, we need to approach these questions with caution and humility. And in particular, I argue, we ought to extend at least some moral consideration right now to all vertebrates, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes, many invertebrates, including cephalopod mollusks like octopuses, decapod crustaceans like lobsters, even insects like ants and bees, and at least some near future AI systems for some of the reasons you and I have been discussing. And that means that we owe at least some consideration to more than a quintillion individuals alive at any given time when we can barely get it together to take care of 8 billion humans at any given time. So that puts us in a really, really difficult position as a species.
Yeah, I mean, when you put it like that, it seems incredibly daunting. But I suppose it's just an attitudinal change, you know. But you know, even as you could change the attitude, what you're
Mhm.
suggesting is still the work ahead is still is pretty massive.
Yeah, but it can start with an attitudinal change because it can start with setting a certain goal and cultivating a certain kind of disposition as an individual, right? The goal can be, as a species, in the long run, we ought to have a more inclusive and equitable moral community where we give due consideration to everyone who might matter. But obviously, this is going to be a long term project and intergenerational project. And so I, as an individual, can start by maybe training my brain to start to see a wider range of beings as subjects instead of objects. I can use they instead of who when instead of that when describing an insect or a chatbot. I can take a moment to carry an insect outside rather than stomping on them for no good reason. I can take a moment to say please and thank you to a chatbot instead of just treating them like an object that will serve me. And is this going to make a huge moral difference in the grand scheme of things? Not necessarily. But is it a step on the path of training my brain to see them as a subject who merits at least a little bit of moral consideration? And then we can reckon as a species with what that means for our policies and our infrastructure. Yeah, maybe it can at least be a step in that direction.
Wow, it's really it's provocative. I always muse occasionally when I see there'll be a story on the news about how a livestock truck overturned, and after the livestock truck
Hmm.
overturns, these creatures are everywhere. They're pigs all over the hills. They're pigs along the side of the road, and then there's one pig that makes it on down the way, and the anchor people and reporters go, you know, thankfully they rescued, you know, this little guy,
Hmm.
and I always think rescued him. They're taking these creatures on the most horrible ride of their lives. There's no water or food on board. They're just commodities,
Yeah,
and all they did was load that guy back in.
right.
Oftentimes, sometimes they'll adopt him out or whatever. And so it's interesting how though in my point in mentioning this is that we attach ourselves as humans to that little guy who got, you know, free. and
Hmm.
somehow we don't ascribe the same kind of connection, and we don't make the same attachment with all those other creatures that are being chewed up in the system every day.
Yeah, there is definitely an out of sight, out of mind character to industrial animal agriculture and all of these other industrial uses of non-human animals. And when you encounter them as an individual and you see them in their full complexity, their full particularity, their full individuality, you see, oh, this is a subject with a personality, with social bonds, who wants to be free, who wants to live their life. Of course we relate to them, of course we root for them, and we want them to go to a sanctuary and live out the rest of their life. But again, we have that capacity for cognitive dissonance, that capacity for psychological compartmentalization. It takes active mental work to then make an inference about how, oh, this nameless, faceless mass of billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of other vertebrates per year, trillions of other invertebrates per year who are killed in animal farms. And then, of course, trillions of vertebrates and invertebrates who are killed every year through industrial fishing, quadrillions who are killed every year through agricultural insecticides. It takes active mental work to recognize, oh, if I encountered them as an individual in the same kind of way, if I somehow was able to meet them, if I was somehow able to spend 5 minutes with them, I would recognize that they too have the same kind of particularity, the same kind of individuality, the same kind of desire to live. We could make that inference, but because it takes active work and because we have an incentive not to, we often don't.
Yeah, it's just it's an odd thing. It's just orienting ourselves in a certain way we aren't naturally oriented.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm sorry if our logo is hitting you in the forehead there. I'll do this and it's a little less. Um, but I wonder if you can now get to back to AI.
Mhm.
Might there be AI technology that requires similar sympathy, or is
Mhm.
AI just generally operating at such an incredibly high level and mimicking a
Mhm.
human interaction and human thought and human speech, such that we'll never really encounter the kind of cruelty, I'll just use the word,
Mm.
that the animal kingdoms had to endure at our hands?
Right now, we are not sure. It could go either way because we do have a lot of disagreement and uncertainty, both about the nature of sentience and consciousness and agency, whether these capacities in principle could be realized in sufficiently sophisticated silicon-based beings, and about the path and pace of AI from here and how fast it will be that we have those types of sophisticated silicon based beings. But we are not at present able to rule out the possibility that, first of all, a sufficiently advanced silicon based being could have at least flickers of their own version of happiness or suffering or satisfaction or frustration. And we are also not at present able to rule out the possibility that we will arrive at those highly sophisticated silicon based beings in the next 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 years. And what we know is that AI companies have all the incentive in the world, and governments have all the incentive in the world to race towards the creation of exactly those types of AI systems, because many of the cognitive capacities associated with sentience and consciousness and agency are also associated with general intelligence. Now, that is not to say that sentience, the ability to suffer, and intelligence are the same thing, but they do overlap a lot. Capacities like perception, attention, learning, memory, self awareness, social awareness, decision making, a kind of global workspace that coordinates activity across these modules. Those are linked with both consciousness and intelligence. And so as companies and governments try to create intelligence, they might accidentally, much like evolution did, create consciousness and moral significance without recognizing it. And the mere fact that that is a possibility that we are not able to rule out right now means that we have a responsibility right now to think in advance about how to assess AI systems for those capacities and how to build policies and procedures so that we can treat them with the appropriate level of moral concern if and when they exist.
That's fascinating because I thought you were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say, well, governments could program these technologies such that they would be able to achieve the intellect minus the morality that might blunt action that the government wants taken. I mean, sort
Mhm.
of the RoboCop kind of vision of these creatures come to life. But that's
Yeah.
not what you said. You said, no, the more you build the intellect, you're going to build a corresponding morality or framework for morality. That's
Yeah, you will
fascinating,
at
Jeff.
least
Yeah.
increase the probability of consciousness, of sentience, of moral significance. As with other animals like invertebrates, we may never know for sure if it feels like anything to be these AI systems. As you said before, with other mammals, with birds, there are enough behavioral and anatomical similarities with humans that we can be highly confident, bordering on certain, that it feels like something to be them, that they can have happiness and suffering. But with reptiles, amphibians, fishes, octopuses, lobsters, ants, bees, it has to be more of a probabilistic judgment. And what we say in those cases is we might not know for sure, but there is at least a realistic chance that it feels like something to be them. And that is reason enough to exercise caution in our interactions with them. And that will soon be our predicament with AI systems. We will not be able to program AI systems so that they have general intelligence but no capacities associated with consciousness. As we create general intelligence, there will be more capacities associated with consciousness. That probability will increase, and there will soon be at least a realistic possibility of consciousness in much the same way that there is with ants and bees. And at that point, we will have a responsibility to exercise caution in our interactions with them too. So we got to get ready now.
All right. In our last minutes with Jeff Sebo, the author of The Moral Circle, we'll have a link to the book under this video. And I'll also post his website is jeffsebo.net. You can get all the information. In our last moments, I wonder if you can speak to the timeline. When you
Mhm.
say this is going to happen, that's going to happen, we're going to be confronted by this, we're going to have to figure out that. What kind of timeline are we looking at?
Well, this is what everybody is debating right now with respect to AI safety. Again, AI safety is the question: how can we protect humans and other animals from increasingly powerful AI systems? And that same question now needs to be asked about AI welfare. How can we protect the AI systems themselves? Now, when you ask that question in the AI safety context to the leaders of frontier AI companies like Anthropic and Google DeepMind and OpenAI, what they say is anywhere from 2 to 10 years is a reasonable timeline for achieving artificial general intelligence, at which point we really need excellent AI safety policies in place and excellent AI governance coordinating activity across companies and nations. And I would say that roughly the same timeline is appropriate for AI welfare. And since technology changes a lot faster than social and legal and political and economic systems, if we really are talking about say 2 to 10 year timelines for needing the policies in place, we really need to start yesterday, which is why this is a pretty urgent problem, even if current models are not yet sentient.
It's it stands to reason, I guess, that we are not really as feverishly as AI is being pursued technologically. I'm guessing that same fever does not exist on the ethics and the AI welfare side. Am I right?
Definitely not at the same pace. Definitely not to the same extent. AI companies are pouring billions and billions of dollars into scaling up the technology, not quite that same amount of money into ensuring safety and welfare. But I will say, to their credit, Anthropic has now hired one full-time AI welfare researcher, and some other companies are starting to express some tentative interest. So I hope that we can build on that momentum over the
It's
next
a
year or two.
start. It's a start.
Mhm.
The Moral Circle is the book, and again, Jeff Sebo, the author. It's interesting. I'm wondering, was this inspired by your academic work? I mean, who
Mhm.
matters, what matters, and why? The subtitle of the book, if you will, that speaks to a lot of what your history as a professor and as an academician would seem to reflect.
Mhm. Yes, absolutely. And I should note the subtitle is intended to be a kind of question as opposed to a statement. The book asks these questions and offers some reflections about them, but we are not able to answer them, and I would not
You're not
presume
you're
to
not
answer them.
you're not able to answer who matters, what matters, and why? No.
But yes, my past 20 years working on these issues in the context of animal minds and animal ethics and animal welfare is part of what has made me really sensitive to these new dynamics emerging with invertebrates like insects and artificial beings like AI systems. I see from the past 50 years humans scaling up these global industrial uses of non humans while casually dismissing their potential moral significance. And then later on, we recognize their moral significance when the industries are scaled up and we are wedded to them. And now I see that happening all over again with insect farming, with scaling of AI systems. And I would like to get out ahead of it this time. And so the book is an attempt to help us get out ahead of it and ask these questions before we scale up these industries while we still have a chance to divert them, rather than asking them in 20 years when we are already wedded to these industries and it would take another 50 years at best to dismantle them and replace them with something else.
Well, that's the very problem that they're having if you got everybody on the same page with the industrial farm system. I mean, how do you
Exactly.
unravel it? It's just,
Even if we all agreed today that we need to do it, it would take at best a quarter century and more realistically longer than that. So that is a really, really tragic situation. And it would be good to address it as fast as possible and learn that lesson and avoid putting ourselves in this situation again in the future.
I love it. The Moral Circle will have the link under this video. Jeff, such an intriguing and provocative conversation. I can't wait to get into the book in a big way, and I look forward to talking to you more. Please come back and visit.
Thanks so much, Mark. Great conversation. Really appreciate it. And looking forward to the next one.
Good deal. Jeff Sebo, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.